Hello everyone, this is Michelle McManus from the Department of Education. Glad you could join us today, and I'm especially thrilled to have Shannon Lockhart and Sue Gainsley from HighScope here to answer some of our many questions about the PQA and how to score certain items. They have prepared a PowerPoint, as you can see, and after a brief introduction, they'll be going section by section to address the questions that were submitted, and then at the end of each section, we'll stop and address any questions that you have typed in during that period of the webinar. And then again, if there's time at the end, we'll have a chance for more questions. Sue and Shannon?
Thank you.
You want us to introduce her or just move on? Go ahead. So I'm Shannon Lockhart, and I'm a Senior Early Childhood Specialist at the HighScope Foundation. And I'm just going to go into just a little bit about the history of the PQA, and then Sue and I are going to answer questions for you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody.
So the Preschool Program Quality Assessment Tool is a tool that really helps us be able to take a look at the quality of the programs that we're working with. It has been research-based. It's gone through many revisions versus research and field tested, but it really looks at best practice. We looked at Head Start performance standards. We looked at licensing, which is part, but then also NEYC guidelines and accreditation process. So we've taken a lot of things in the field that really tell us what quality is to help be able to develop this instrument. And it's a measure that looks at the overall quality, and it's really not a tool for us to determine the content of what teachers teach, but really taking a look at how things are done and how it affects young children. And again, it's an objective tool, not based on personal preferences, but really to look at that quality of what's happening in the classroom. Again, as early childhood specialists, our job is really to build a relationship with these teachers and use the PQA as a tool to help look at teachers' strengths, help them to be able to see what is their strengths in the classroom and where do they lie on this continuum of quality, and help them to be able to guide them to higher levels of quality in the classroom. So how the HighScope PQA began really years ago, it was developed from the HighScope Program Implementation Profile, called the PIP, and it was originally used to look at the HighScope curriculum and help teachers and trainers become certified. And then that was revised into the first version, which then was used as the Michigan School Readiness Program back then. And then from data that we collected from the Michigan School Readiness Program, we revised that PQA again to the current tool, which is the 2003 version, to look at the overall quality of programs. But as you all know, not every tool is perfect, and over the years we realized, research has shown a lot more in terms of quality. Curriculums have changed, and so we want to be able to really research more and take a look at the quality that's happening in programs and how do we revise that PQA to make it match more to what the field is saying high quality experiences are. So the current PQA that you have is going through revisions right now. So just know that that's happening, and we will again pilot it to make sure that we have the research behind it before it's actually revised and published again. As you all know, there are two booklets that the PQA is divided into. Form A assesses the quality of the classroom. This is what we can see in action in the classroom. So that's a separate form, and it should be completed for each classroom. And then there's a Form B, which assesses the quality in the agency or program. And for HighScope, we recommend that each program that has classrooms within one building just do one Form B. But if they have several sites, then they would need to complete a different Form B for each of those locations. But according to Michelle, you're required just to do one, correct?
One per subrecipient, that's correct.
So now we're going to go into looking at questions that were sent into us based around the learning environment.
So the first question had to do with looking at the environment and what constitutes non-program materials in the environment. And so as you're looking at the row, we want to make sure that the classroom is tidy and that materials in the classroom are available to children. So if you've got classrooms with boxes of teacher-stored materials, fans, extra chairs, materials that aren't used specifically for children in the program, those materials need to be stored out of the classroom in cupboards so that the classroom really reflects materials that children are using.
So the next question that came in was around 1C, which is talking about the location of interest areas. And the question was, how much space is considered adequate space in each area? And for a level 5, it's really about looking at, do children have enough space in that area to allow them to be able to spread their materials out? Or is it that they have several children in that area who are playing together? Can they work together in that area without tripping over each other, or do I have to take my materials to another area because there's not enough room in that space for me? So really look to the children to let you know whether there's enough space in that area. Also, when it comes to like the sand and water, we know that is smaller than most other areas. And usually when a new toy is, or new material is put in the sand and water area, a lot of kids want to go there. Our teachers' problem solving with children and allowing children to really figure out how to play in that area and resolve that problem, and our children saying, okay, well, there's just not enough room here for me. Let me make a different plan and I'll come back to this later. So it's not limiting the number of children into that sand and water area, but allowing them to be able to help problem solve and use that as a problem solving situation.
So it sounds like in this case, it's not a matter of like square footage.
Right.
It's more of how the space is functioning for the children.
Right. So for example, if in the house area, you know the majority of your children are playing in the house area, but you don't have enough space for it, but you have this huge large space over in this other area, and so it's easier to say, okay, I'll expand my house area to allow more children to play in there because that's where most of my children are playing. And then I'll expand or lessen some of the other areas to allow for that type of play to happen.
And it's also not saying that children, if the block area is a busy area and some children don't find room in the block area because it's so crowded, they can take their blocks and decide to build in an adjoining area. We don't want to penalize teachers because one day the majority of children decide that they're going to go to a certain area. We just want to give teachers the benefit of the doubt that they are looking at how their classroom is being used and adjusting their interest areas to accommodate the interest and the interest of their children.
So the next question is under an outdoor play area, 1D. How do you score the outdoor play area when bad weather and the classroom does not or goes to the gym? This one tends to trip a lot of people up because of not being able to get outside. How do you really assess that? So if teachers and children don't go outside because of bad weather, observers can still do 1D, which is the learning environment. You can still see outside whether they have portable materials, and you can ask the teacher, do they take materials out? You can get the square footage from the director, and so you can fill out that 1D, but it's the 2L that you can't complete because it talks about adult-child interactions. So that one you would put not observed or reported for 2L. But 1D, again, cannot be completed for a gym or a gross motor room because it's just not fair to do that for them.
So 1D is the outdoor play area. So sometimes teachers or assessors will try to assess the gym as if it's the outside play area. So that's not what, we're not doing that. Classroom materials are systematically arranged, and somebody asked for us to give examples of what that looks like grouped by function. And again, this is to help children understand where to find materials. And so we're looking at the properties of materials and the functions of them. Are the trains and the train tracks close together? Are the cars and the trains and the things that go with vehicles together? Are all the baby doll materials together? And we have some pictures to show you. In this picture of an art cart, you can see that all of the Play-Doh and clay materials are together. So the properties, things, the Play-Doh, the foam, and the clay. And the tools that are used with those materials are easily found, so children don't have to hunt on two different shelves for the Play-Doh rollers and the pizza cutters for the Play-Doh. And then in this example, again, of the art shelf, you've got all of your, you've got your tape and your masking tape and your Scotch tape together. You've got the glue and the glue sticks and the staplers. All of those things are going to help children stick things to paper or attach things together. And then the bottom shelves are your collaging materials. Again, everything that children might need to use to collage with. So again, it's helping children understand that these are materials that I can use for a specific purpose. All of the baby doll things are together, so I don't need to, as a child, I don't need to hunt for the diapers and the blankets and the other things that are accessories for baby dolls because they're all located on the same shelf. That's what we mean by type and function.
So the other question about 1F and 1G together, classroom materials and materials are plentiful, is what is the difference between 1F, many manipulatives, and 1G, plentiful manipulatives? So again, based on the pictures that you've just seen, but also some of these that we're going to be showing you, is that 1F is about manipulatives that children can use in each area. And then 1G, again, is about the quantity of those materials, but they kind of go hand in hand. So for example, here, there's many manipulatives, but there's also more than one item. So, so we've got rocks, we've got, in this classroom they have rocks, they've got wood, but at the same time they have several measuring tools. They've got several trucks, they've got several buckets and several shovels. Same thing here is, you know, there's several tracks that children can play with, as well as trains and cars with the tracks, and multiple bears. So it's not just one item, but many manipulatives in plentiful quantities. So here it's lots of, you know, several blankets, several gloves for children to play with, several types of diapers and purses and wallets.
I think what you have to also take into consideration when you're looking at plentiful materials is during work time, are children able to have enough materials to play with? If there are 2 cell phones and there's a conflict over cell phones daily, then that's a problem. So it's not necessarily that the bin is 3/4 full, but that when children want to play with pegs, there's enough pegs to allow several children to use them.
So 1H is on materials reflect human diversity, and this one always is really sending a lot of us into a loop. I mean, we even have an issue around this item as well, because again, we want to look to our children that are represented in our classrooms and the community in which they live in. So we want to be able to look at the types of materials that support their home, the moms and dads' jobs. So look to the community. What's in the community? Yes, community helpers are good, but at the same time, what are children's parents? What do they do? What does mom do? What does dad do? And represent that clothing in the classroom. And both genders. It's not just females, but males as well. Getting the shoes and the jackets and the hats and the cowboy boots and things like that that represent the children's home environment as well as the community. Food containers, dishes, cooking utensils, and community items. Look to the community. Go knocking on their doors. Hey, we own a preschool and we want to be able to bring in the culture into our preschool. Do you have items that we could take into the home or into our program? So menus and from different places. Some programs have actually gone into the community and taken pictures of major interest areas. Maybe it's the local store or a structure that everybody knows about, and so they take those and then they tape them to cardboard blocks, and then children use those in the block area with cars or trains or whatever. Again, photos of children. Some programs actually are taking photos of children and families and making them into flannel stories or into magnetic stories that children can tell about their own families and about different things that happen in the classroom. Of course, food in meals that parents share about their culture and different cultural music.
I was in a rural community last year, and in one of the classrooms, they had photos of parents with their farm implements, their big, huge tractors and combines and things, and those kinds of things posted because that's what the children knew. It was important to them. The children knew a lot more about those things than I did, and it was really valuable to them to be able to be the experts in that.
Yeah, and teachers need to question what they have up on their walls. And I walked into a program down in Alabama, and they had pictures up on the wall. They weren't even representing the race of the children within that classroom, and they looked like 1970s pictures. And I said, well, I'm wondering why these pictures are up. Oh, we don't know. They're just there. So we have to question why we have things in our classrooms as well, because we want to represent the current children that we have in our classrooms.
Child-initiated displays. The question was about commercial products and if they are acceptable on the walls as displayed. And we want to think again about this as reflecting the artwork and creating an environment that respects children and is for children. So when we have an overwhelming display on the wall, we're distracting from children's work, and it's no longer a child-centered classroom. We have, again, some pictures that we'll talk through. We want to look at the classroom as a whole, too. So does one bulletin board count against a PQA score versus is this classroom really representing the artwork and information for children? So if you look at this bulletin board right here, you again might have to question the teacher. You see child-centered art being prominently displayed, but then you also see a border and some sparkles in the background that are detracting from the children's work. And so you might have that conversation, how is this benefiting children, really, what's the word, not benefiting, highlighting children's work? Or is that border around there a cute border that is adding something? And the answer is no, that border is really detracting from children's work. So you might have a conversation about that with a classroom.
We also have to think about, this might not be just the only thing we have up on the wall, but you've got shelves, you've got materials, you've got carpet, you've got, all these different things that are happening at the same time, and you have to be aware of the colors and all the designs, things like that can be overwhelming when we start adding more and more and more to reflect what's going on.
This is another example, and we had a conversation among ourselves at HighScope about how would you help a teacher understand this bulletin board. And while it says our spectacular creations, is that again detracting from the children's work? How is that meaningful? How is the word our spectacular creations meaningful to children? Is this really a label that's for an adult purpose? It is really detracting from the children's work. It's not meaningful to children. So I would recommend that be something that teachers reevaluate. This one is more obvious. This one is totally teacher-driven.
And overwhelming. I mean, you can't even see the children because it's so overwhelming.
The purpose of this is to show perhaps administrators and parents that I am a wonderful preschool teacher that knows how to be creative myself, but am putting my efforts into this display versus really working with children. That's
I see in many classrooms, they have, a display of all the children's birthdays, and I've seen them do that many different ways, trying to incorporate the children's work into it. But can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I guess the idea is how is this being used as a benefit for children? We don't need to have a whole bulletin board that shows children's birthdays on it. We can have a calendar ourselves that helps us remember children's birthdays. It's not something that children need to know or need to reference on a huge bulletin board. I don't know if that's speaking enough to that.
That's helpful.
What do you have to add to that?
Well, again, I think it's about children. How do children relate to what they're seeing on the walls? And is it more for a display on for adults to be able to say, oh, hey, look at my children, or is it really about a child-centered classroom saying, oh, children, take a look at what you've done. Let's show this to your moms and your dads and show them how you're learning and show the progress in your artwork, from scribbling to actually representing. Again, it's about the children and not really about what we want.
I think it's really beneficial what you said. You asked the person in Alabama. We've had several discussions over the past year about really thinking about every minute of your day, and is this benefiting children some way? Is this something that they're learning from or taking something from, or is it just something I've always done and so I need to keep doing it? And I think taking the same focus on what you put up in your classroom is really valuable way to think about it.
And we want them to be reflective of what they're doing with children and how they're using it.
So this is another example. Children aren't reading whatever these little paragraphs are, so it really isn't something that's honoring children's work that is in a child-appropriate way.
So just to jump in with a question, I think a lot of people might have this. There's a lot of questions, and we'll try to get to them. But so they're asking, so it's helpful to hear about this, but how would we then score it?
Mm-hmm.
Again, it depends on the amount that's in the room. If they just had one of these, then it would be a level 3. But if the walls are covered, in more adult displays like these, or even displays where they've taken children's artwork and cut it out and put it into something, then again that would be a lower score.
I think you want to also remember that we're using this as a tool. So if you're scoring a 3 because you've got this bulletin board that's not necessarily reflecting and honoring children's work, then you have the discussion about why that is, and you help teachers modify that and reevaluate. So I think that's, to me, that's the most important part, is that conversation, not the score, but helping teachers understand why
What's the next step?
and how do we address that and make it more child-centered.
And that's where the curriculum comes in. I mean, the PQA can only do so much. And it's really the curriculum that defines what a 5 is. It's the curriculum that defines how do you get from a 3 to a 5, or how do you get from a 1 to a 3. And that's where you go to, whether it's creative curriculum, Montessori, High Scope, Bank Street, whatever curriculum you're using, you go to that curriculum to help you make those decisions about how you need to move further in reaching children and getting those experiences, those quality experiences for them.
That's good. We've also been referring them back to the standards of quality.
Standards of quality,
Standards of
exactly.
quality. What
Exactly.
does that say
Yep.
about
And the
child
EYC
displays?
guidelines,
Right.
Yeah.
best practice.
So going back to that first, the first example, if you're remembering, it was the children's artwork that was
Strung up.
strung up, and it was developmentally appropriate artwork, but there were some modifications that could be made. If that was the only thing that I saw that was questionable, that would be a really easy fix. And I may not penalize somebody for that. I might give them a 5 because for the most part their room is fine, and we address that immediately and realize why that needs to be changed. So
But
again-
don't give them a 5 and not address it. I mean, that, you have
Exactly.
to address
Right.
it.
Exactly.
And another question I've been hearing floating around, based on the Essentials for Early Literacy instruction, is about the alphabet charts. So could you just speak to that?
I don't think there's a problem, to have an alphabet chart somewhere hung up down low that children can use and that you refer to. That children need, how do you make an L? Well, let's go take a look. And that it's not just displayed way up high, for adults to see, and that children aren't using it. I mean, what the 10 essentials are there is to be useful experiences and useful for children, not for us to just come in and say, okay, now we have it in our classrooms, check it off our list. It's supposed to be
tool.
there to be useful. And it shouldn't be just an alphabet chart. We should have other things. We should have letters, we should have wooden letters, we should have numbers. I mean, it should be just ingrained and embedded into the materials that children are using in the classroom.
Right. Thank you.
So do you want to
Okay.
stop it?
So yes, we had several questions come in. I see there's one here about what alphabet chart do you recommend? I'm not sure if the two of you have a recommendation.
We don't have a recommendation, and it was discussed with the Essentials workshop that there are things to think about when you're choosing alphabet charts, so that your pictures on your alphabet letters really represent the initial sounds of that letter. And so we don't have the names of those, but that's something
Right.
to consider.
And I will make myself a note to share some information that we received from Nell Duke on how to make those decisions. But she also did not provide one recommendation, just some things to think about.
There is something that online just that you can get called highway alphabet cards, and they're big alphabet that you can print out onto paper, and we have those in the block area now, and children use them with cars, and you can make them connect, but they're called highway letters.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think if we can go back up, if you could scroll up towards the top, and Liz Walker had a question to start. A little bit down. There. So this was about talking about the space. And so Liz is asking, there is a recommended area that's a minimum licensing requirement. So sometimes the classrooms are small. So if the dramatic play area is small and the children and teachers decide that there's really only room for 4 children, is that okay because they came to a
Sure.
solution?
Yeah, if children are involved in that process, go ahead.
I think the problem is that it was a teacher problem that they brought to the children.
Oh,
I
that's
don't think
different.
it needs to,
That's different.
it's not really a problem. We don't want to limit the number of children in an area. That becomes a policing problem with teachers and children worried about where they can play. So I think it needs to be addressed, again, as if my dramatic play area is too small, how can I adjust the house area to accommodate more children, because that is showing me that the children are interested in going there. That
Yeah,
would be
if it's an
my,
adult, if it's an adult question that's posed to children, that's different than children going to the adult and saying, hey, let's.
but even if a child goes to an adult and says, we only want 4 children here, that's not okay.
No,
We need,
It's limiting children.
limiting
from-
children.
From how they want to play,
we need to adjust the classroom and modify it. It may be that we modify it for work time and then we adjust for large group time. Shelves have wheels and we can make those adjustments.
Or you could also invite children to spread out
Yes, absolutely.
Right,
into,
right.
the adjoining area. The library could easily become part of the house area for that
Yes.
time.
Or if they're role playing being in a car, well, let's go over to a different area and the car can be in the other area and then they can still, play house or whatever in the dramatic play area. Yeah.
Thank you. There were several questions about the outdoor play. I think it was item
That they
2L.
couldn't do not
That
applicable.
you said that they wouldn't be able to complete. I noticed that as well as I reviewed this PowerPoint. And so I think that's something that I will be taking back to the GSRP team for us to discuss whether it's time to reconsider that rule that we had added into the online PQA for GSRP. So I'm not sure what to tell you about scoring it at this point, since that's not an option. I don't know, Sue and Shannon, if you have any insight into that. But it's a GSRP issue, not a high scope issue.
But I'm also seeing that it sounds like there's an issue with not being able to choose not applicable
Yes,
within the online version.
that's what I'm saying.
And
And
so-
it was a MDE decision.
Oh, I see. Okay.
To
'cause
not
it-
allow that.
Okay,
In
okay,
the
so then that's
past,
what you have to.
Before we had our arms around our nice cohort of early childhood specialists, it had been an issue sometimes just not scoring things because it was too difficult.
I see, okay.
But I think that's probably something we can relook at this point. Liz, I'm going to skip your question for 2 until we get to that section of the PQA. They just were looking, Kelly was looking for a clarification between 1F and 1G. Is that correct? 1F is about the choices available, and 1G is about the amount of each material?
And I thought we covered.
Yeah, and those go hand in hand, and you really have to look at the children and how work time is developing, and do children have enough magnet tiles to create something, or is there competition among the 2 baby bottles? And if that's the case, we may need to add more materials. And we want to make sure that we have plentiful materials, in that there are a lot of open-ended materials to choose from in the art area. And there are several things to use at the sand and water table.
Yeah, so it doesn't, again, it's all based on the number of children, and of course, GSRP, you have 16 children. So if I have 10 blocks in my block area, that's not enough. But if I have a set of wooden blocks, and then maybe I have some foam blocks and some cardboard blocks, and so then that's sufficient in being able to supply that plentiful materials. So that it's a combination of things. It doesn't mean that they have to have 100, or 10 sets of blocks, so that each child has their own set.
Right.
But just enough to again, look, are children being able to use materials at work time, and be able to not have to argue all the time about over the same material all the time. And that is an indication to teachers. Okay, if I have children that have a conflict over the same thing over and over and over again, that's telling me something about my materials, and I need to take a look at that and figure out what that is.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, could you scroll back up? I knew there was another question there from Kelly. As far as the adult versus child displays, what if the teacher says that the children make art, but then they always want to take it home, so none of it is displayed?
I think you can get some things on the wall. We don't want displays that are teacher displays. So I don't think children take everything home. There's typically, we don't want to say how much needs to be on the wall, but we need to see children's artwork on the wall. But that does, and
it could happen during choice time or work time. They're making things that need to dry, so you put it up on the wall. And sometimes you can also ask children, can we keep it up on the wall for a couple days and then you can take it home? Or, sometimes they're really good about it. And some kids, while they're making it, you say, oh, well, maybe you can find a spot on the wall to stick that up on. And then they'll go up and find that spot. So they're just as much as part of putting things on the wall as the teacher is.
But we're not going to penalize teachers because their children want to take their artwork home. So if teachers are making a concerted effort to display children's work, give them the benefit of the doubt.
And you might also take a photo.
Sure.
If they're wanting to take something home right away and you want to be able to display it, it's easy now to take photos of artwork or
blocks
block play,
other kinds of things that they build and display those. You wouldn't consider that an adult?
No, that's honoring children's work.
Thank you. So could you speak to Sarah's concern about instead of, it feels like it's not objective if there's not, I think what you're saying, Sarah, is that if there's not if we can't add numbers to these, if we can't define some or plentiful with a specific quantity, then it might be subjective.
Well, the issue with giving quantity, to actually say, that's the reason why we said quantity, plentiful quantity, because once we start getting into numbers, then people will really go in. I mean, we're already seeing it. Whether we have plentiful or not, we're already seeing people going in and saying, oh, well, I saw you only had 10 books out, or I saw that you had 25 over here, and so now I'm marking you down for that. Well, it's not about that. It's look to the children, and are the children able to use materials in a way that they can carry out their plans, they can play with each other without conflicts, and that the shelves are not bare, that it's not empty or space is empty because of lack of materials. And you can tell when you walk into a classroom when they don't have enough materials.
We don't want to be punitive. We don't want to be punitive and punish a classroom for, they definitely need to be well stocked, but at the same time, if they have 9 puzzles instead of 10 puzzles, then that's, you get into a slippery slope there too with putting that quota on.
Right. And I think it goes back to what you were saying at the beginning, is that we're trying to help teachers look and be reflective of their practice. And so having these conversations with teachers to be reflective is just another support to them, so that even when you're not there, then they can think about it themselves. Oh, well, there's 3 puzzles, but I have 6 kids who want to do puzzles. Maybe I can get some more puzzles.
Right.
Okay. So Rhonda had a question about, and I've seen this lately too, where they might have a place on the wall, like they've posted a large piece of construction paper and it has the child's name on it, and then that's where that child's work goes.
I don't have a problem with that. It just sounds like an organizational thing that's allowing children to be responsible for hanging up their work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. And it might actually encourage more kids to keep their work there if they know that's their place, and then they can go and get it when they're ready to take it home.
I also want to go back to Sarah's question about the fidelity. And we definitely want to make sure that we are reading the descriptors correctly and that we aren't interpreting things according to our own preferences. But at some point, you know, when you say plentiful materials, there is some form of a judgment in there. But at the same time, you're looking to children to make that for you. You're not coming in and you're saying, oh, well, I think you have to have this much materials on your shelves, or, you know, you need to be doing this. Again, it's not a way to penalize teachers. It's to help them be able to see and reflect on their classrooms and how children are experiencing what's going on in their classroom.
Okay, so I see that it's 3:47, and we have still lots of information to get through, so I think we're just going to go ahead and move on to section 2. We'll find out how long we can keep going, and perhaps we'll need to schedule another time or maybe get some written input from you to help answer the rest of the questions that we aren't able to get to.
Sure.
There was several questions around the plan, do, review, or the planning time, work or choice time, free play, and recall time. One of the questions was, does plan, do, review need to occur in sequence? And what was given to us too by Blanche and Michelle was in your GSRP implementation manual. This description came straight from that implementation manual. And yes, the planning, choice, and review do need to occur within sequence. And the reason for that is that you want to be able to help that sequential thinking and that complex thinking of being able to have children plan and put into action their thoughts and their ideas, but then also be able to reflect back on that. And that all is part of executive function and being able to allow children to build working memory and that inhibitory control and cognitive flexibility. And the closer, so that sequential thinking really only happens when children can do that within a sequence.
The other part of that is that we want to make sure that the planning time and the reflection time are specific parts of the daily routine and not combined with lunchtime or something else that's happening. It needs to be its own part of the daily routine for exactly that reason, that we don't want children to be distracted by opening up lunch boxes as they're going through this process.
Because again, their brains are one way of thinking. You know, okay, it's lunch. I'm hungry. I'm going to eat lunch. So they've forgotten, you know, what they're doing, what they did at work time. And again, the other thing too is that we as teachers, in order to help children build that memory and that thinking into the past and thinking forward, we use specific strategies to help children be able to do that. And when we're distracted by, you know, preparing for meals and snacks, or, you know, in the middle of washing hands or small group time or walking down the hall to recall while we're walking outside, we don't have that ability to help them be able to put their thoughts and their ideas into words. And through these strategies, these games that we play with them, these props, these representations, all of those help children be able to put what they've done and what they think into action. So the other question, you know, so even small group times, yes, it can happen prior or it can happen after small group time. But the thing is that we need to make sure, if it's planning time, make sure that your small group time is ended and children know that it has ended. So now it's planning time, and we're going to use this strategy to plan. Because again, every child needs to come up with a plan. Otherwise, what ends up happening is if it's not a strong transition from small group time to planning time, you have children wandering in the classroom. And so then they really didn't get a plan out of what they wanted to do, and it's not developing those executive function skills. Same thing with recall. If it's during snacks and meals, it can happen right before then. So they sit down, they have they've already cleaned the table off, so let's get all of that cleaning the table off and making sure that it's disinfected and everything, hands are washed and everything. They can do that recall and then set things out for lunch or for snacks, or even after breakfast. I'm done with breakfast, now I'm going to make my plan and move on. Another question was, what if programs plan, do review in the morning and only choice in the afternoon? The PQA does not require programs to do the plan, do review more than once. However, if programs do a choice time in the afternoon, you could do a quick verbal plan. It's not required, but you could do a quick plan, hey, where do you want to go, or what materials do you want to use? And then let parents get engaged in it and let them recall with children on their way home, or as they get children ready to go home. But again, it's not required. The PQA does not say that they have to do that. Also, it would be beneficial for ECSs to definitely observe in the morning, to make sure that they're getting that plan, do review when they do it. And also, another question was, well, it's not really choice time that they're doing, because their teachers are really setting out table toys for children to choose from before they go home. So it's really not considered the whole plan, do review. So again, just document the evidence of the adult-child interactions, and not to worry about thinking that that's another whole plan, do review process choice, because children are just making choices of the table toys that they're setting out.
This question was about whether how to score small group times when the children stay in the same small group, excuse me, but the teachers change small groups. So that's tricky, trying to get around the idea that groups have to stay together. And really, we want teachers and children to stay together for at least 2 months, 1 to 2 months.
So I guess I had a question on what you were just saying, Sue, because I know in other curriculums they encourage more frequent changing of the small groups. And so
the reason that we want children and adults to stay together for that amount of time is because they're building that close relationship, and teachers are really able to understand children's development and build that bond with children. So I understand why teachers want to do that, particularly in situations where you have what you may call, rather than team teaching, a lead teacher and an assistant teacher, and they feel like, because the responsibilities may not be equal, teachers are trying to figure out how to get to all the children. But really, the importance of that small group connection really outweighs the switching around. And if you're working with all the children at work time and throughout the rest of the daily routine, you really should be able to build those other connections. Does that make sense?
okay, so if we could just scroll up a little bit, we'll look at the questions that have come in. That's good. Oh, actually, Liz had one from earlier that I said we would get back to, so if you could scroll up more. There. For 2H, when a teacher takes 3 minutes to clean tables and is not at large group, but then joins the group with the other teachers, Do we still have to score this a
That's
3?
fine.
No,
That's
that's
fine.
fine.
They can do that. There's no reason for them
So
not to
those
do
are
that.
just certain housekeeping things that have to
Yeah,
happen.
yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And maybe a child helps do that, and then they all move over to, no big deal.
Yeah.
Again, it's not to penalize teachers. We know that we even have to do that. We got to clean our tables off and then get over into large group time. So,
Okay, right. So, sorry if you could
no,
then
that's fine.
scroll back down. Okay, so right there with Michelle. So she has classrooms that plan, then do small group. Because sometimes kids want to continue doing the small group activity as they go into choice time.
So that sounds backwards. So,
Mm-hmm.
so what you would do is small group time first, then make that announcement that small group time is ending. If you choose to continue your small group as your plan, that's what you would do. So you do small group time, then you do planning, and at planning time, children can choose to continue small group. You want to make sure that planning happens right before choice time because you want children to immediately act upon their decisions and their plan and carry out their plans.
And it would be a good idea to have the teachers say, okay, so you're choosing to use the small group materials as your plan for choice time. Put it into those words so children know that small group time has ended and now work time or choice time has started. Because some children will go through and they'll get done playing with those materials and then all of a sudden work time's over and that, well, I didn't get a chance to make a plan. I didn't get a chance to play. Well, remember, your choice, your plan was to use these materials during work time. Or during choice time. So make sure that teachers know that they have to have that separation from small group. The end is done, and now it's planned, and this is what you've chosen.
Thank you. There's another question about naming of the parts of the day. So on their classroom schedules, does it have to be the exact names of the day?
I guess I need a better, let
So
me read the
she's saying
question.
in the PQA, like it calls specifically for, there must be time to plan, there must be work time basically, there's time to recall, there's small group, there's large group. Like, do they have to be called that?
They need to be
Or-
called something because children need to know that they're moving from one activity to another. So whether you call it reflection time or I don't know what else you would call it, it does need to be called something so children know that during this part of the day we talk about this. I don't know what you would call it besides planning, but it's make a choice time. I don't know what it could be,
Right.
but they need to know that there are segments of the day and that these are the expectations for those segments.
Right, and that they have those separate times.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't
And
think
we
they.
want to see on the
Yeah,
schedule.
Yeah, but it doesn't say that they have to call this a large group time, or this
Right.
has to be a small group time. It could be activity time, or as long as people know what they're doing during that part of the day.
Yes.
And
I-
children
and
know.
children know.
Children know
And
is the
children.
biggest part.
And I think that GSRP would not have any issue with that as well. And then, so I'm going to try to focus on the PQA questions. Although there is one here about, doesn't MDE require any work time to be in a sequence of PDR? I specifically looked in the implementation manual and did not see where that was written. I think there is some confusion about that, and that's another thing that the team can talk about, the GSRP team at MDE, and get back to everyone on that.
Oh, I see.
And I think I can answer that, yes, we know that you have to clean up after work time and before recall. That's just another part of the day that has to happen, part of that housekeeping.
Yeah, small group time as a small group, not morning. Yeah.
Yes,
It's a morning
so
meeting.
Kathy had a question about rotating from 3 groups of children, rotating amongst teachers. And I'll let you two chime in on this, but as far as I'm concerned, this would not meet the definition of small group time. This might be some other time of the day that you have fit into your daily routine, but it does not meet the definition for small group.
Agreed.
I don't know how you would fit that in. So there are 3, the children, well, that's a moot point.
So at small group time, they do this activity, then they rotate to that activity, then they rotate to that activity.
So it's almost like
That's not a small group.
modified, like a center,
Rotation
like that you
time.
might
Yeah.
see in
Yeah.
kindergarten,
Yeah.
rotation,
Yeah.
yeah. So Melissa had a question about,
It's a large group. She meant large group.
so it could be called large group instead of morning meeting or vice versa?
Large group, we want a large group time to be an active time, so it depends on what's happening at morning meeting. Is there movement and music and songs, what's taking place?
So it doesn't really matter what they call it,
Yes.
as long
right.
as it's meeting the requirements or
Yes,
the definition that will, is written in the rows
right.
for how
Oh,
to score.
she actually clarifies, there are 3 different small group times in a day.
You're back at the other question.
Yeah, so, and I think that, yeah, then you would have to watch each of those small group times. And so you're saying that the children go in a different small group
That's-
at different
yeah, that's
times
not-
during the
that's
day?
not-
No,
With
that's
different
not,
staff,
yeah, that's not
yeah.
the same. It still needs to be, they stay with the same children, same teachers for 2 months, and then they can switch. So you want to go on to adult child?
So it's 4:03. It looks like a few people have dropped off. I'm sure they have other places that they need to be. Maybe we could just quickly look at some of the questions in section 3.
There's only a couple in 3.
And I think they might be more
Pretty
straightforward.
straightforward, yeah. So the first question was children's basic needs. Is it an automatic level 3 if no bathroom is in the, or no bathroom is in the classroom? Again, if a teacher takes the children to the bathroom when they ask, they should be given a level 5. However, if there is not an available teacher to take children, and children have to wait to be taken down to the bathroom, then that would be a level 3. But if there's a third teacher in the classroom, and that third teacher takes several children, or if the one teacher says, okay, hey, Jamal has to go to the bathroom, so who else has to go to the bathroom, and then they take that group to the bathroom, that's okay. They get a level 5 for those. The other question for children's basic needs is, do classrooms get a level 5 for, and that's USDA, the person that wrote in says FDA, but it was USDA approved food regardless of what it is. If the food is prepared and brought in and it has been approved by the USDA already, they get a level 5 even though we may not agree with what's been approved.
That doesn't mean that you wouldn't continue to work with
Yes.
the food service personnel to provide appropriate foods for the children.
And again, if the program supplements snacks that are not nutritious, then that would not be a level 5. You have to use, just keep an idea. Are teachers able to make choices and decisions about this? If not, then again, that would, if they get scored lower, then that would be something that you and the teachers would need to work out with the administration and being able to change that.
And that is the same for
mhm,
CACFP.
mhm. Oh, yeah, excuse me. There's been some questions, and I've heard this in the field, about encouraging parents to stay when they drop off their children. And we don't want to, there was some confusion about having to actually hear teachers verbally encourage parents to stay, and that's not the intent. We want to let parents know through our policies and through our welcoming environment that they're certainly welcome to come into the classroom, but we do not need to hear you ask Jamal's parents every day to please stay. That was, I think, where this question was coming from.
So it doesn't have to be a verbal, hey, we need you to stay. It's you can see it in action when parents actually stay to help their children. For 3E, strategies for non-English speaking children, give examples of supporting non-English children in the classroom. Again, this is about supporting children in the classroom only. We can't evaluate what's done with parents because that's not on the PQA. So children who are bilingual or who speak English fairly well, then there's not a need there for strategies to communicate with them because they can communicate already. Teachers, again, don't have control over that home environment. So if parents talk to their native language to children at home, then they should be allowed to do that. And we just have to be able to make different ways to communicate with those children when they're in our program. So again, besides what's written in the PQA, some strategies might include sign language, learning certain words to help during the day, having the child show them, what they need or want, pointing to things, asking another child who speaks the language to communicate for them, and getting a teacher who speaks the language to help as well.
This question was regarding imitating children's play. And basically, that's the same strategy. We're using it at work time to enter children's play and play as partners with children. And the other, if you go back to the other slide, 3G is looking primarily at copying children and imitating their actions, and that probably is going to happen more at small group time. They're basically the same strategy.
Yeah. So it's basically imitating what children are doing. And again, this is, for teachers, this is an easy way into working with children because, again, we want to enter children's play in a way that's not obtrusive to them. So one way we can do that is by using the materials the way the child is using them. And again, it's also being able to support them at their developmental level and scaffold on those developmental levels. So if we're using those materials like the child, then we can actually begin to show that child we're interested in what they're doing, we're doing what they're doing, and they're playing along with us. This one is on 3L, children solve problems with materials. What if we don't observe children having problems with materials? The first thing we need to be aware of is how children solve materials. Some children may have a problem and then quickly solve it, so we might not see it. Other children may be more vocal and they might ask for help and we might hear that. Some children may struggle but then give up. And then some children may stick with it until they work it out. And most times, we can see children solving a problem. It might be trying to get a paper towel out of the dispenser. It might be that simple. So we need to be aware of what children are doing throughout the day, and not just during work time or choice time or small group time where we might see them working with materials, but throughout the day. What are they having problems with? Are they having problems with pouring their water or opening their what container for food? Opening their milk. Those types. So there are struggles they have problems with throughout the day. The other thing we need to be aware of is, are teachers giving children the opportunity to solve problems, or do they solve those problems for children ahead of time? Are all the milk containers open already before they give it to the children?
So are teachers challenging children really to do more and more? things
Right.
as they become. Once they can navigate the whole classroom without any problems, then maybe they need to figure out a way to challenge them, to create problems and let them work
Or
it
maybe
out.
the materials just aren't challenging enough and they need to rotate their materials out and get some more challenging materials in.
This is a similar question about resolving conflicts. And we have to, again, look at our teachers jumping in too quickly and preventing that process from even happening. Are there situations that are put in place that are preventing children from even having to encounter problems? Are there assigned seats so children don't even encounter problems over who's sitting where? So look at those levels 1 and 3, and if those things are happening where teachers are fixing problems before they happen, creating rules so that problems don't happen, that's a problem. That's where you're going to score them as 1s and 3s. They're fixing the problem before even children get a chance to try to negotiate and resolve problems themselves.
And this is where you had pointed out when we talked earlier that you can always ask the teacher, how do you respond when there is a conflict? And they can describe it.
Yeah, so if you don't see it, ask the teacher. Definitely ask the teacher. Yeah. How do you handle conflicts in the classroom? And write down what they say.
Shall we go back to the questions on the, or do you want to keep going?
Let's keep going because these are important.
So in section 4, this is where we get into curriculum planning and assessment. So 4A talks about comprehensive documented curriculum. And so row 4 is really talking about a written curriculum statement provides a rationale for the program practices and child development goals. So the curriculum statement should be available to parents. It might be in their family handbook or it might be within curriculum resources. But the statement should include the philosophy about how children learn, the adult's role in the learning process, and the specific curriculum content that the curriculum has a part of their program.
There was a question about under team teaching, what happens if you have a small program with 8 children and only 1 teacher? We don't penalize that teacher for not being able to not have a team teaching. So that teacher still gets a 5. And then as a professional, we encourage that teacher to seek out support with other teachers and get her planning, his or her planning that way. But we're not penalizing that teacher because she's by herself.
So I just want to point out that on the slide it says, if there's only 1 teacher, mark not observed or reported.
Oh.
Yeah, you could either, yeah, I mean, this really is about a teaching team. So it really needs to be not observed or reported. But again, as Sue said, when you have more than one idea or one person to talk things through with, it's always best.
Absolutely.
So even if I'm one teacher, yeah, I might be in one room building. Well, that's different, but you could still talk to a director or something. But if you have the opportunity to get engaged with other teachers and really help think through what your plans are for the lesson plans for the next day, then that's always helpful.
I think the question was, does this person automatically get scored a 1?
Yeah.
And that's not the case.
That's, yeah.
Thank you.
For 4D, staff use anecdotal notes for planning. Again, this is about being able to take those documented anecdotal notes that teachers write down on children and use them for a purpose. So teachers are reviewing their anecdotes together. They're using that information to come up with a small group idea, a large group idea, But it doesn't mean they're going to use every child's anecdote. But it's that they support what they're gathering in the classroom and being able to use those. So here's an example on 5/117, outside time. Philip said, "Look, I found a worm. The rain made it come out of the ground." So some planning ideas might be to add worms and dirt to the sand table, explore worms at small group time. This is at small group time, this is where you can use a child's anecdote to expose other children to ideas and activities and exploration. Or maybe add books about worms and bugs, maybe find some bug catchers.
So could you just speak a little bit, if you can go back one slide, sorry, and talk about the difference between scoring a 3 and scoring a 5, where 3 is they sometimes use, and then 5 is they do use, but I'm sure you don't mean like every choice the teacher makes is based on an anecdotal no.
No, it could be that they're using whatever assessment measure. They could be using the KDIs or content, state guidelines, whatever. But they are using the observations that they've taken during the day to help them make decisions on the next day. That would be a level 5.
You have to have a conversation with the teachers too.
Right.
And the PQA is one day snapshot, but you really want to get a feel for how are you deciding what activities you're doing in the classroom. And you want to have that conversation with teachers that say, we're looking at children's interests, and here's some examples of today on our lesson plans. The reason that we chose this activity is this. So it's a conversation that you had where you can determine, are teachers truly looking at children's current levels of development? And it's a judgment call, but you would have a feel for, are these teachers truly using the information that they're gathering? Or, oh, I only gather anecdotes when I need to complete my assessment. You'll get a feel for that too.
And that would be sometimes.
Maybe you ask, will you show me your anecdotal notes and show me how you're using them? Or give me an example.
Thank you. That actually gets us all the way through Form A. We haven't touched Form B, and I see there are questions hanging out there. I think that at this point we're going to wrap up. We've far exceeded our allotted time. We really appreciate your time and your expertise, and hopefully you'll be able to work with me to get some written answers so that we can provide those when we post the webinar.
The one that you did want to talk about was 3M, where they didn't have the option to choose not observed.
Right, there are multiples that you have suggested that HighScope would say the best option is to mark not observed or not
Reported.
Thank you, reported. So I would, at this point, encourage the ECSs to use the options for interviewing teachers for things they don't observe as much as possible. And then I will be taking this back to the GSRP team. We'll have another discussion about it to determine if that's something we need to change. If it's something we don't feel is appropriate to change, then we will provide additional guidance to you in the future. I wouldn't expect that to happen this PQA season, however.
Well, and also those items that don't have questions, like 3M, it doesn't have a question. And at this point, you can't say not observed. So then use that opportunity to ask a question and make sure it's the same way you ask it. You know, how do you handle conflicts in the classroom? And then get them to tell you about that process.
I think I would just like to reiterate that this is a tool and that we're using it to guide practice and to help teachers feel their strengths and not look for petty instances where we're able to mark a teacher down. You have to look at the big picture. How are children responding to the environment? and how is this classroom functioning? And then talk with teachers and get a true understanding of, do they understand the purpose of this item and this level? And provide them the guidance if they seem confused.
Thank you so much. Thanks for sticking with us, all of you. I know this is a really valuable opportunity to go to the source, and we're lucky to have you here. And you'll see the PQA post or the webinar posted in a few days. It might take a little bit longer for us to get written answers to you, but you can expect those.
Thank you very much.